This is Stephen Bourne with the Rise Civic League. Notice I'm alone today. That's because our other board members are out volunteering other places. Which brings us to, we'd like to get a couple more board members. The best way to get involved, start coming to some of the meetings, get your feet wet, see what we need, and then make that decision. Also, if you notice on the Civic News, if you click on volunteers, it's getting bigger. A number of our commissions and committees need people. Recreation's short too. A couple other have 3 openings. So take a look and try to get more involved. So from the top 10, one of the big things, there was a meeting between Rye Water District, Rye Conservation, and the Select Board. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss how to move forward about drilling for wells and Rye Conservation property. And what we learned from Rye Water District was that we've been really running off 2 wells because Cedar Run Well is very high in iron and manganese, and they've only been using in case of emergency. The other 2 wells, they're very close in proximity. One environmental accident, an oil truck spilling, could shut down all of our water in Rye. They also found out that a small percentage of people in Rye use a majority of Rye Water District wells. So what we're also in Rye Water, I think we mentioned last time, Rye Water District said no to a development on Route 1 because there's just not enough well. We're in a precarious position even with a drought. So please take a look at that. The assessment that we talked a lot about was completed. Our value went up 47.6%, 3% property value. Once you get your fall tax bill, if you want to ask for an abatement and go back, you have until March 31st to do that. After this, you're going to see, what do you think the biggest salt marsh in Rye is? We're here right now. Alex is going to tell you all about that, so stay tuned. But David Burdick gave a great presentation on the value of salt marshes. We've got some highlights there. You can see the presentation in the video. But salt marshes are a huge sink for carbon. So they're talking about spending millions of dollars to scrub carbon out of the atmosphere. The salt marshes probably do it best. Also, we learned about the ecosystem, how important it is to fisheries, etc. Also, the Harbor Road Bridge, we resurfaced it, spent a bunch of money on it last year. It needs a bunch of work. The Select Board is still trying to, and the DPW Director, still trying to figure out what the options are, how much it's going to cost. The Rye Police have done a ton of investigation, looking at body cameras. They made a proposal to the Select Board for the system they want to go with, so that should be in the budget and moving forward. We've got to do a better job of explaining to everyone what the land use regulations are, zoning, ordinance, and all that. It's something that if we had more help, we could get done. But there's 26 ordinances that are changed, modified. That meeting was on the 20th. Only 2 of us from the public were there. But you can get the summary and the white paper there. The planning board has finally assigned a steering committee for the master plan. So actually, we're very thankful. 5 residents are going to be part of it. We'll be there. It's a 2-year commitment, so we hope moving that forward. All right, you're going to go see another marsh. Stay tuned.
Here we are at the other part of Odeon State Park, farmhouse and barn. That's the 1800s Odeon farmhouse and the barn that goes with it. It's owned by the state. To access the Odeon graveyard and the salt marsh overlook, you walk in between the barn and the house behind me, and you will see the beginning of a clear trail. Very soon you come up on the graveyard, you walk further, and you're on the salt marsh. So we are walking down to the overlook of Fairhill Salt Marsh, but to get there you have to go to Odeon State Park and park in between the historic farmhouse and barn beyond the main entrance. And then there's a path, and you walk down, and the first thing you come to is here, the old Odeon Point graveyard. And there are both Odeons here and possibly some native peoples we don't know. There's a lot of unmarked graves. When you continue on beyond the graveyard, which is maintained by the colonial Danes, you come out on a beautiful overlook with all sorts of interesting signage that explains the importance of nature that you're looking at, both the salt marsh and flora and fauna. So it's well worth coming down here. I'm standing on the edge of Fairhill Salt Marsh, the largest one in Rye, over 400 acres. There's a total of 850 acres of salt marsh in Rye, going from Fairhill. South of here, there's the Wallace Sands Marsh. Everybody knows what that is. And then further south from there, Foss Beach, Rye Harbor, you have the great Aquam Salt Marsh, back of Ray's Restaurant, all that area. And then over on Lock Road, you will find the smallest salt marsh, and that is the Rye Harbor Marsh. Now last month, Stephen Bourne was at the area of the Aquam Marsh that was restored. It had dredge put in from 41 and 62 from Rye Harbor that dumped in that section of salt marsh. And you saw, and he read off the sign, he told you about how that was restored from 2001 to 2005. That was a wonderful local effort. If you want to see the details of that, you need to go down and read the sign and then walk the 1-minute trail to a beautiful overlook so you can see, just like here, where we're standing at Fairhill, you can look at that section of Aquam, which is right on the edge of Goss Farm. Now, an interesting thing about salt marsh, you'll hear about this in the top 10. We talked about David Burdick's presentation, but half of the salt marshes on the east coast of the United States were filled in by the late 60s when the environmental movement started and people stopped doing that, or started to be laws sort of enforced. In 1968, the Rye Conservation Commission wrote a wonderful little booklet. That's where I learned about the acreage. And they had a commentary in there, and they said there's two kinds of people. People who understand the salt marshes and their importance to the ecosystem, not to mention their aesthetic purpose. But then there's other kinds of people, and they look at it and they say, this is wasted land, we got to fill it in and put houses on it. I would like to think, since that booklet was written in the late 60s, that we have advanced a lot, and so there's far fewer of the latter group and a lot more of the former group. Thank you.